I thought she was going on a girls' trip. But that night, my entire world cracked open like thin glass. I followed a trail of lies straight to a lonely cabin in the woods where she thought no one would find her. But when the door opened, it was me standing there. What happened next wasn't just a confrontation. It was the night everything changed. If you've ever tasted betrayal, stay with me till the end. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because this story deserves to be heard. I used to believe love was something unshakable, like roots buried deep into the ground, surviving storms and seasons. For years, I built my life around that belief. Around her, around us. Selena was my anchor. The woman who turned a small, quiet apartment into something that felt like home. I can still remember the way her laughter used to fill the kitchen, how she'd wrap her arms around me when the world outside was too loud. Those were the moments I thought nothing could ever tear us apart. I worked long hours, not because I loved my job that much, but because I wanted to give us everything I'd once only dreamed of. A better house, a steady future, a life that felt safe, and she always said she understood. She used to wait for me at the door, barefoot with that soft smile that made the entire world seem simpler. Somewhere along the line, that warmth started to fade, but like a fool, I didn't want to see it. At first, it was the little things. The way she stopped asking about my day, the way her eyes shifted away when I looked at her for too long. I told myself people change, love matures. Maybe she was just tired. We all get tired, right? But there was something else hidden in that silence. Something sharp, like a knife she hadn't yet used. Selena had always been good at keeping her mask in place. Calm, sweet, collected, but masks don't last forever. One evening, when I walked through the door, she was already on her phone. She didn't hear me come in, and for a few seconds I watched the smile on her face. Soft, giddy, like the one she used to give me. But it wasn't for me anymore. The way her fingers lingered on the screen, the way she bit her lip as she typed, it was a quiet betrayal I couldn't name yet. I remember how I pretended not to notice. I told myself it was nothing. A friend, a colleague. A story I could rewrite in my head to protect the version of us I still believed in. I laughed at my own denial later because deep down I already knew. Love doesn't disappear overnight. It's stolen, piece by piece, moment by moment. She had started coming home late, claiming it was work, that the company was running on a new project. I trusted her. I trusted her with the same blind faith I'd once trusted the ground beneath my feet. And maybe that's why the cracks hurt so much when they finally started to show. There was a night, I'll never forget it, when she hugged me and it felt empty. Like she was only holding the memory of us, not me. I should have said something then. I should have asked the questions clawing at my chest. But I didn't. Because when you love someone, you think silence will keep everything from breaking. You think pretending will hold the pieces together a little longer. That was my first mistake. And her first victory. The first real crack appeared on a Thursday night. Selena was rushing around the bedroom, tossing clothes into her bag with a kind of nervous energy I hadn't seen before. She told me she was going away for the weekend with her friends. A little girl's trip to unwind. She said it so casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. But her voice trembled just enough for me to hear what she didn't say. I'd been married to her long enough to recognize the difference between excitement and guilt. I leaned against the doorframe, watching her fold a silk dress she'd never worn around me. Not once. It wasn't the kind of dress you pack for a simple weekend with friends. It was the kind that made statements. My stomach tightened, but I forced a smile and asked her about it. She laughed it off, saying the girls planned a fancy dinner at some lodge. Her eyes didn't meet mine when she said it. They never did anymore. Later that night, when she thought I was asleep, she packed again. More carefully this time. Different shoes, makeup she rarely used, and something small she tucked at the bottom of the suitcase wrapped in a sweater. I didn't know what it was then, but the way she hid it told me enough. Lies never walk through the front door. They creep in quiet, pretending to be ordinary. The next morning, she kissed me goodbye like a woman rehearsing a part. Her lips brushed mine, but there was no warmth behind it. I stood in the driveway, watching her drive off, her hand steady on the wheel. Mine wasn't. My fingers trembled against my thigh because deep down, I already knew something ugly was blooming beneath the surface of our perfect little life. I went back inside and sat in the silence she left behind. That's when I noticed the faint smell on her jacket, the kind of cologne I'd never worn. Not once, it wasn't hers either. It lingered like a whisper on my skin, a reminder I couldn't ignore anymore. My chest burned, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't push the feeling away. I let it sit there, heavy, sharp. I opened the trunk of her car an hour before she left. I don't know what I expected to find. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. What I found were 2 wine glasses wrapped together in a towel and a bottle of the kind of champagne we use to save for anniversaries. She hadn't taken 1 glass, she'd taken 2. In that single moment, the shape of my reality shifted. The foundation I'd built my trust on didn't just crack, it began to rot from the inside out. My mind wanted to believe she was still mine. My heart knew she wasn't. I closed the trunk quietly, but my soul was already screaming. I didn't plan to follow her. At least that's what I told myself as I sat behind the wheel, engine silent, headlights off. But some moments don't ask for permission, they just pull you into them. This was one of those. I watched the taillights of her car disappear into the night, a soft red glow fading down the road. My pulse was a steady drum in my ears. My breath came shallow, uneven. I knew whatever waited at the end of that road would change everything. And I still pressed my foot on the pedal. The city gave way to empty highways where the world felt too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't soothe, it warns. She drove steadily, like someone who knew exactly where she was going. Not a single wrong turn, not even a pause. This wasn't a last-minute plan with friends. This was a destination she'd chosen long before she'd kissed me goodbye that morning. The first drops of rain began to fall, tapping against my windshield like 1,000 tiny reminders. Every mile we drove, the weight inside my chest grew heavier. She wasn't mine anymore, not in the way I had always believed. She was just a stranger wearing the face of the woman I'd loved. I kept a safe distance. I didn't want her to see me. A part of me still clung to the hope that I was wrong, that maybe she was exactly where she said she'd be. But then she took a turn off the highway and onto a narrow forest road, a place that reeked of secrecy. No restaurants, no lodges, just tall trees, wet earth, and a darkness that felt personal. When the cabin lights came into view, it hit me like a punch. A small wooden cabin stood at the end of the road, warm lights glowing from the windows, almost mocking me with their comfort. And then, as if the universe wanted me to stop lying to myself, another car pulled up. A man stepped out. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight to her. And when she opened the door, she didn't greet him like a friend. She melted into him. The rain grew heavier, but I didn't feel it. My hands tightened on the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My throat burned, but I couldn't scream. I couldn't even breathe properly. There was no dramatic shatter, no slow unraveling. Just a clean, brutal cut through the life I thought I had. Watching her lean into another man was like standing outside my own house, locked out, while someone else lived my life inside. She laughed. He kissed her. And just like that, every lie she'd ever whispered came to life in front of me. I didn't need proof anymore. I'd already seen enough, but something inside me whispered, "Don't walk away. Not yet." This wasn't going to end with me broken. Not this time. I don't remember getting out of the car. One moment I was gripping the wheel like it was the only thing holding me together, and the next, the rain was falling on my face, cold and relentless. Each step toward that cabin felt heavier than the last. Not because I was unsure of what I was doing, but because I already knew what I was about to see up close. Lies are sharp from a distance, but they cut deeper when you hold them in your hands. Their laughter reached me first, soft, carefree. The kind of sound that used to come from our living room on quiet Sunday mornings. Selena's voice mingled with his like they belonged to each other. It wasn't the sound of a mistake. It was the sound of a choice. I reached the door just as they popped open the champagne. I could hear the cork hit the wooden floor inside. It was almost poetic, the sound of celebration moments before the storm hit. I didn't knock gently. My fist crashed against the door in a single hard strike. The laughter stopped instantly. A few seconds later, I heard footsteps, hers. When the door opened, time slowed. Her face turned pale like someone had ripped the mask right off her skin. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her eyes darted from my soaked clothes to my clenched jaw. Then they flicked back toward Darren, standing behind her with a smirk that made my blood heat. "Surprised to see me?" I asked, my voice low. It didn't shake the way I expected it to. It was steady, cold, like the part of me that still loved her had died somewhere on that dark road. She tried to speak, stumbling over words that didn't fit anymore. Excuses, explanations, broken syllables. I pushed the door open wider and stepped in. Darren straightened his back, pretending to be calm, but his arrogance was too loud to ignore. He reached for the bottle like none of this mattered. That was the last straw. My hand knocked the bottle clean out of his grip. It hit the floor, shattered, champagne spilling like spilled promises between us. His smirk faltered then. Selena flinched. And in that split second, the power shifted. I pulled the wedding photo from my jacket pocket, creased, slightly wet from the rain, and tossed it at her feet. It landed between us like a boundary line. This, I said, was real. At least I thought it was. Her tears didn't move me. Not anymore. I wasn't standing there as a broken man begging for answers. I was standing there as the storm she never thought would come. And I was just getting started. The air inside that cabin thickened the moment I crossed the threshold. Darren stepped forward like he was defending something that belonged to him. But he didn't understand. I wasn't there to fight for Selena. I was there to end something, to strip away the story they'd written behind my back and set it on fire. Selena's voice cracked when she finally found her words. Kiranth. It's not what it looks like, I laughed. It wasn't the bitter, dramatic laugh you see in movies. It was quiet, empty, the kind that comes from a man who's already done with pretending. It's exactly what it looks like, I said softly. And you know it. Darren tried to play the tough one, stepping closer, squaring his shoulders as if this was some competition he could win. Maybe you should leave, man. This doesn't concern you anymore. His arrogance was almost amusing. I tilted my head, calm in a way that scared both of them. Doesn't concern me? I whispered. You're standing in the cabin my wife told me she was visiting with her friends. You're drinking the champagne we saved for our next anniversary. And you think this doesn't concern me? The look on his face faltered just enough to tell me I'd hit a nerve. I turned back to Selena. You lied to me, repeatedly. But the part you'll hate the most, I said, my voice tightening, is that I stopped believing you long before tonight. I pulled out my phone. Her eyes widened the second she saw the call log. Earlier that week, I had called each of the friends she'd claimed to be traveling with. Not one of them had plans for a trip. Not one of them even knew about it. The lie had been stitched together so poorly it was almost insulting. And then, I added, opening another folder, I recorded your calls. Every late-night whisper, every promise you made to him while I was sitting in the next room believing in us. Her face drained of color, hands trembling at her sides. But I wasn't finished. I looked at Darren, and his fake confidence started to crack as I spoke. And you really should have kept your office talk to yourself. You don't steal from a company and brag about it to your affair partner, especially not when her husband works in the same department. The silence that followed was thick. He tried to deny it, but I didn't need his words. I had everything. I'd built this moment piece by piece, like setting up a perfect trap. Do you know the best part? I said quietly. I don't need to raise my voice. I've already won. And right then, the first flicker of fear crossed both their faces. That's when I knew this wasn't heartbreak anymore. This was power. I'll never forget the look on their faces that night. It wasn't the kind of silence that begged for mercy. It was the kind that echoed, like karma itself had taken center stage. I stood at the edge of that grand hall, the same place where they once made me feel small. But now it was my voice that carried through the walls. Lena was the first to break. Her hands trembled as the truth unfolded, every carefully constructed lie tearing apart, like fragile paper in the wind. I had spent months walking through my own storm, picking up the pieces of my heart, and now every shard had become a weapon of truth. The world she built on betrayal was collapsing brick by brick. I never wanted this, she whispered, almost like she thought it would erase what she had done. But words don't erase scars. They just echo louder when the guilt is real. Kiranth, the man they once underestimated, stood firm, my pulse steady but my soul burning. For a long time I believed karma was something distant, something that arrived quietly. I was wrong. It arrives with weight. It makes its entrance like thunder. And tonight, thunder had a name. The guests who once laughed at my humiliation now stared in stunned silence. The same family that turned their back on me now looked like strangers. And Lena, her perfect mask shattered. She had mocked me, betrayed me, and thought she'd walk away untouched. But betrayal never leaves empty-handed. It takes its payment. Her confession spilled out, not because she wanted to, but because the truth cornered her. And as every word left her lips, her carefully painted world faded. I could see it, the panic in her eyes, the regret too late to matter. And then came the moment I had waited for, not revenge, but release. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to strike back. Karma had already done what I could never do. It made her taste the weight of her own choices. As I turned away, I felt the silence following me like a storm clearing. No cheers, no applause, just the quiet power of justice delivered. Lena fell, not because I pushed her, but because the truth finally caught up. And as the night swallowed her lies, I walked into a future that was mine again. I never imagined peace could sound like silence, not the heavy silence of betrayal, but the kind that wraps around your shoulders like a warm cloak. That night, when everything had finally fallen apart for them, I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. For the first time in a long time, the weight that lived in my chest wasn't dragging me down. It was lifting. The world hadn't suddenly become perfect. Scars don't disappear overnight. But as I stood beneath the soft morning light a few days later, I realized those scars had turned into my armor. Every tear, every betrayal, every moment they made me question my worth. It all shaped me into someone stronger than I ever thought I could be. People often say revenge is sweet, but they're wrong. It isn't sweet. It's silent. It's the quiet satisfaction of watching truth stand taller than any lie. Lena had faced the consequences of her choices, not because I forced them, but because karma is patient. It waits, it remembers, and when it arrives, it leaves nothing untouched. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to remind anyone what they had done. They saw it, they felt it, and deep down they knew this ending wasn't written by me. It was written by their own hands. Walking away from that chapter wasn't about running from the pain. It was about embracing who I became through it. I had spent so long trying to prove myself to people who were never worthy of that proof. Now I didn't need their approval. I had my own. The wind brushed against my face as I took a step forward. No longer the broken man they once pitied, but someone who had risen through the fire. My name wasn't whispered in mockery anymore. It carried weight. It carried truth. Lena vanished from my story the way storms do. Loud, destructive, unforgettable, but never permanent. Me? I learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without letting it break you. This isn't a story of revenge. It's a story of justice, of growth, of walking through the flames and coming out unburned. And as I close this chapter, I look at the world differently, not with bitterness, but with power. Because when karma delivers, all that's left is your choice, to stay stuck in the ashes or rise. I chose to rise.